we keep our personal emotions separate from those questions, because I think sometimes you can ask those questions, but they're emotionally loaded. They're like, things used to be amazing before, like, now you don't do anything, and they turn into not questions. They turn into demands, accusations,
demands, everything else.
Yeah, or they turn into things that sound complainy, like, oh, things were amazing before, like, how do you expect me to, and it sounds like a complaint as opposed to a question, which is what you're positioning it as. And I think that's because our emotion gets so close to the question.
Yes. Yeah.
How do you keep your emotions separate and go, actually, I need to negotiate effectively to get to where I want to get to, rather than sound like I'm complaining, and now that person is only hearing the energy of the complaint as opposed to the explanation of what you're looking for?
Well, the two possibilities are, can you talk it through with a friend who's neutral, who's not going to give you advice?
Mm-hmm.
You need a sounding board. You don't need advice. You know what the answers are, in point of fact. So the advice is a waste of time. One of the great things I realized why I was effective on a suicide hotline, in many cases, I'm just a sounding board.
Mm.
I'm letting somebody say stuff out loud.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of having it bang around in their head, which is either confusing or it makes sense in a bad way, or you say stuff out loud and you get a better grip on it.
Mm.
So a friend is a great sounding board. And you could even say in advance, look, I'm not looking for advice. I'm just looking for a sounding board. I want to talk this stuff out. I want to hear what I'm thinking. That's one potential option. You got friends that always want to give advice anyway. So
Yeah.
there's a little bit of a negotiation up front with that friend, or maybe certain friends are good for being sounding boards and others aren't. Then in a moment, like what happens if you didn't have the time to prepare? You catch yourself in a moment, which is similar to any negotiation. Suddenly you caught yourself in the middle, but your gut instinct is going to kick in. The mistake everybody makes is they want to deny the dynamic instead of observing it. I don't want to sound like I'm complaining. I don't want to sound like a whining, complaining, typical whining, complaining female. Instead say, I'm probably going to sound like a typical whining, complaining female, or whatever side of that argument that you're in, argument, interaction, negotiation. If you simply call it out in advance, then the other side gets braced for it and they deal with it.
Mm-hmm.
They don't get to, I don't want to sound like I'm complaining. And then the other person is saying, yeah, but you're going to go ahead and complain.
Yeah.
If you say, I'm going to sound like I'm complaining, that's that 2 millimeter shift.
Mm-hmm.
The other person will listen and then say, well, those were actually some legitimate points.
Yeah.
So it's a combination of the two things, each of which take practice. Like nobody automatically diffuses stuff in advance.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody automatically does. If you got to the point where you're denying it, you're actually a little bit further down the line. You're aware of the dynamic. So now just shift from denying to recognizing.